So let's see here. On our agenda tonight, we'll start with some introductions and we'll have a brief project update to the topics you've reviewed, visual preferences and facility structures. We'll be sharing some highlights from your survey feedback, and during the meeting, we will be discussing some of that input as well. So let's go to the next slide. Let's see, so just as a reminder to all, sorry, my kids are right outside of here and they're not being quiet, so I apologize for that noise. But if you look at the bottom of your screen, you will see the tools for this meeting, and there is a mute button, and we just ask if you are not talking to keep yourself muted. On the video portion, you can keep your video off. It helps with the bandwidth. Unless you're talking, we'd love to see your face. And you can see in the participant section, there is an option to raise your hand, and that's right next to your name. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand, and with the chat, you can add questions or comments in there, and we will address those as we move along. Next slide, please. All right, so let's find out who's on the phone. When I call your name, just briefly introduce yourself, and you probably know Multnomah County is looking to move into phase 1. So if you could let me know what you are looking forward to when we move into phase 1, that would be great. Let's see it, starting down the list here. Looks like we have Carol Coast. She is, the Coasts are new to this group, or at least to this format of the group. They've been on the group before. And Carol, are you there?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm Carol Coast. I live on the east end of Carpenter Lane. And what else did you want? What are we looking forward to when we move into phase 1?
Correct, yeah.
I'm not sure, other than we'd love to have a face-to-face meeting. As soon as possible.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I don't know that that's going to be possible even as we move into phase 1. Our city has certain regulations too that we are trying to follow. So it still might be a while before we have a face-to-face meeting on this with this group, but we definitely are looking forward to that as well. Let's see, who else do we have here? Charlie.
I'm Charlie, for those of you that don't know. And something that I'm looking forward to is, I think just things kind of getting back to normal, but at the same time, there's like the risk of more outbreak. So I'm also not looking forward to it at the same time. But yeah.
Great. Nice to have you again, Charlie. All right, so how about Daniel?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Benita. Daniel Newberry, I'm the director of the Johnson Creek Watershed Council. We're a community organization doing science-based restoration with the help of the community. And I am really looking forward to phase 1 and maybe phase 2 also, because a big part of what we do is engaging the community in volunteer work. And we've canceled all of our volunteer events since mid-March. And we're currently looking at protocols that we can put in place that where we could still have people volunteering, but in a safe manner. Thank you.
That's great. I love your background. It's a nice touch. Let's see, who do we have next here? I'm going to skip over the speakers. We'll save them for last. Mike, I think this is Mike Cowan. Are you there?
Yeah, here I am.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, everyone, I'm down at the other end of the street from Mike and Carol on Carpenter Lane. And what am I looking forward to? I don't know. I've probably been stuck in phase 1 for 15 years. So I don't know.
I like that. Well, I know that they say that they're going to start opening restaurants. So I know a lot of people have been looking forward to eating in a restaurant. Let's see, who else do we have next on the list? We have Patricia, new to the group. She's been to a few of the meetings when we've had them in person, and now she's joining us on the Zoom. Are you there, Patricia? Let's see if I can unmute you to see if that helps. Aubrey, are you able to unmute Patricia?
Okay, I think I'm, can you hear me now?
There we go. Yep, we got her.
Okay, very good. I'm Patricia Fiedler, and I live on Bluff Road. I'm right across from the Surface Nursery. And what I'm looking forward to is actually being able to go out and sit down with my friends and have coffee and actually sit at a restaurant. I do live in Clackamas County, so I have been able to eat at a restaurant, which was nice.
Oh, good. Very nice. It's good to have you. And thanks for participating. Let's see, who do we have next here? Jane.
Hi there. I am living down here off of Lusted Road. There's probably going to be activity right in front of or near our house on Lusted for the pipeline. And I'm looking forward to, typical female thing, a pedicure.
Very nice. Yes. All righty. Let's see, Sean.
Okay. Hello. Can you see me?
Yep, we can see it and we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Anyway, Sean Narrison with Surface Nursery. We've been farming the 95 acres for, I don't know, 25 years or so. And then the land around it. I am really looking forward to going to a restaurant and meeting some friends and just, you know, getting back into a little bit of normalcy. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. Yes, I don't know if I even remember what normal is anymore.
Good point. Good point.
It's been a pretty crazy time, man. Locked up at home. Rosemary, married to Mike. Did you want to introduce yourself?
She's not here right now.
Oh, she's not here. Okay. All right. Well, then let's get to, I don't think I've missed anybody for our audience members. So we'll move on to our presenters. David Peters.
Hello, everyone. We're glad you could join us again for our online meeting here. I'm the program director, so we're excited to be able to continue to talk with you, even though it's a little more challenging online. But in terms of what I'm looking forward to, I would say a restaurant, but I'm not sure I want to quite move into that in phase one. So I guess I'm kind of excited that the other counties are getting to phase 2 and phase 3, and some campgrounds are starting to open, because I think I'd really like to get out and see some scenery and go camping.
Excellent. I feel the same way. I got what you may have noticed. I'm in a travel trailer, so I'm hoping to get this travel trailer out on the road and do some camping with our boys. Jeff.
Good evening, everybody. Jeff McGraw, architect and site design lead. I echo Dave Peters. I'm looking forward to getting on some hiking trails that have been closed, some of my favorite trails in the gorge, as well as getting out and camping as well. So I second that. Thank you.
Excellent. Right. We have Casey.
Hi, everyone. Casey Hagerman with MWA Architects. I think I need a haircut, so kind of looking forward to that.
It looks great.
Oh, yeah.
You know, just grow it out.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anybody that I missed here? I thought we might have a few others non-speaker
Got Jason there.
Oh, Jason, there we go. Yes, Jason.
Hi, folks. I'm Jason Hurst with NNA Landscape Architecture. Casey, I gave myself a haircut, so go the DIY route if you want. And I'm looking forward to being able to go out for ice cream, because every day my son hassles me to go to ice cream. I keep saying no. So I want that to open up and make that happen.
Well, the wait at the Dairy Queen drive-thru is only 40 minutes or so.
He has a particular one he likes to go to.
Well, I know there's a lot of places that are open. I don't know if you've been to East Wind Drive-In. It's out past Sandy area, and they have a drive-through with 1 foot long ice cream cones. We got the medium-sized one, so it wasn't quite a foot long, but I don't know if it's even possible to eat a foot long ice cream cone. But if you happen to be out and about looking for a little drive, that's a good place to go.
Yeah, sounds good. My son, the one he wants, has a play center inside, so.
Oh, that makes sense.
75% of the deal.
Good. All right, well, let's get started then. I'll start with the project update from David Peters.
Okay, get the unmute going here. So just wanted to update you on a few things that have been going on since the last time we met. The primary one is that we continue to work with our design consultants, and they are working with us to help us understand the treatment processes and how those pieces fit together in terms of the site design. And some of that is what we'll be talking a little bit about tonight as we go through to get your inputs on some of that ongoing work. You may have seen some surveyors out in the neighborhood over the last few weeks. They've been doing some work on Dodge Park Boulevard and Altman Road. And next week, they're actually will be getting started on Carpenter Lane. So that's giving us information that will be used in helping us do the evaluations for the pipeline work, helping us to gain an understanding of the existing utilities out in the area, and just also the property lines and boundaries in the area. So that's ongoing work that you'll see going down Carpenter Lane next week. And then we haven't talked a lot about Lusted Hill, but things are moving forward for the corrosion control improvements at our existing facilities at what we call our Lusted Hill site on Cottrell Road. And we have finished the design and submitted that to the State of Oregon Health Authority. And we have been working with the contractor to finalize pricing on that, and hope to take that to our city council here in just a couple weeks for approval. And with their approval, we'll be able to get started on the construction of those facilities late this summer. It's probably going to be August, September timeframe that they'll get started on that. But those improvements are mostly taking place on the site, with some silos being added and some additions to the buildings and the pump station. There will also be a little bit of work down at the bottom of the hill. I lost the name of the folks that live there at the bottom of the hill, but we'll be doing some tie-ins to the conduits there as we run chemical lines. Dyack, there we go. Thank you, Sam Dyack. That's right. We'll be doing a little bit of work down there as part of that process also. And so associated with the project updates, I also wanted to address some questions that we received since our last meeting. Daniel was asking a little bit about construction process water. And I thought I'd just run through those questions and the answers that we have at this point. So the first question was, where will the construction process water come from? Assuming for at least part of the time the connection to the bore run supply will not be available. And this is a good question, and it is one that we are evaluating. There are water rights that are and a well that are associated with the property that we own. We are working out the details of the ownership of those and what type of water rights they are. And so we're doing those evaluations. So that might be one possible source. Another possible source for construction water would be asking for a connection with the Pleasant Home Water District, who has their facilities right there on the site. So we have a couple alternatives that will meet our needs for the construction. When it gets into big water needs for testing of pipes and things like that, we anticipate that we will have connections to our conduits to be able to supply those types of needs. But there's more to come on that. Those are just some of the things that are being looked at this point. Where will the used construction process water go, and how will it be treated and disposed of? And with the note that we hope it's not Johnson Creek. So the criteria for dealing with the construction process water will be developed as we go through the design and the permitting. Whatever we do with construction water, if it is going to go off the site, it would have to be treated prior to being able to do that. How we do that, I don't have all the answers. I was trying to get some feedback from my permitting folks and things like that to better understand that, and we just don't have the answers yet. But we will keep these questions on the top of our list so that we can get you a better answer as we go forward with that. And then the last question, I guess series of questions. I assume all the on-site wells that were used for irrigation for the current farming operations, what will happen to those wells post-project? And that's another one that we'll need to evaluate. And I guess it's been my assumption that if we're able, and I think we do have an intent of trying to continue to have at least a portion of the site remain in agriculture. And if that's the case, I would assume that we would maintain the well for those irrigation types of uses. And the other parts of those questions, I guess, were similar to the upper questions. Will they be the source for the construction process water? And as I described, we will be looking at that. What will happen to the water rights from any wells? If they're senior water rights, it'd be great if they could be put to in-stream use for fish. And if they're not relatively senior rights, this would be a moot discussion. We have not dug out the details of the water rights yet. I know there are some, I've been told there are some complexities to those wells and those rights. And I think the last I'd heard that those rights had not been perfected at this point. So my guess is that may mean they're not senior rights. So that may mean it's a moot point, but we will have more information on that as we go forward. Those are all good questions that we have our designers taking a look at, and we'll have to get addressed as we look forward to asking for permits in the future. So does that answer your questions or raise some more questions, Daniel, or anyone else?
Daniel says yes, thank you.
All right. So go to the next slide then. So the next couple slides, we just wanted to provide an overview of the topics we talked about at our last meeting and kind of the strategies that were talked about that we'll be continuing to look at in more detail. So some of the feedback we got in terms of the potential dealing with the traffic, whether it's for construction or in operations, would be to have that traffic come have access off of Dodge Park and or Bluff Road, that those were the better roads for handling the truck facilities, our trucks. in terms of getting trucks to major roads, the thought was trying to take routes that go north to I-84 or south to US 26, as those are roads that are actually better structured to handle the larger trucks. And the idea of having one-way traffic rather than two-way truck traffic going in and out of the site was also stated as a preference. So those were some of the things we had talked about in traffic management. And then if we go to the next slide, we also talked about edges and buffers, and I think we'll see how that begins to tie to the layout of the site tonight. But some of the things we talked about last month was that there was preferences for using vegetated screening. You know, this is an agricultural area, farming, nursery stock being grown. To the extent that we can keep with those types of things, that was a high priority. Forested and hedgerows were another form of vegetated screening that seemed to resonate with folks. At least nursery stock approach for agriculture use purposes. So continuing to use the property for nursery would allow us to create some edges and buffers in the area and kind of continue to meet the nature of the area up there. And then there was also some expressed interest in creating an area for wildlife, a buffer zone that we've heard that there are elk and other animals that traverse through these areas, and creating some opportunities for that to continue is also of value. Next slide. So tonight, we show this slide each time. This was the list of things that we got to their first couple meetings on what folks thought were the important things for us to describe and talk about our approach to design. And so we've been continuing to work down that list. And tonight, we can see the dates we've talked about. Some of the different topics, and tonight we're going to continue talking about the facility size and appearance, and with the idea that next month we'll get into pipelines and some of the facility discussions. So with that introduction, I guess I get to pass this along.
I just want to pause for really quick here because Ben has arrived, and so I just wanted to acknowledge that Ben from our last meeting, the speaker at our last meeting, he's here too now, and he's just listening in to hear any more feedback that may come from what we'd already talked about with our architectural aspects of this facility. So moving along here to Casey and the site design update.
So before we get into tonight's main topic, I want to provide a quick update about our site design activities. We've begun working with engineers and landscape architects to start laying out the various facilities on the site and incorporating your preferences from last month about edges and buffers. We've made some first steps and thinking about these questions that you raised last year about the buildings themselves and where on site there will be. Some of these we'll address tonight, and some we haven't made that much progress on actually, but we're really digging into the architecture now, and with your preferences from tonight, we'll be able to make some progress on these. And I want to reiterate how important your feedback has been so far for us. For instance, we're preparing for this architectural workshop next month, and we've already shared the survey results that you just provided. That has already been shared with the design team and is already influencing how we're thinking about the buildings and the site itself. So I just want to let you know that we really appreciate the feedback you've been giving us. It's been awesome. So next, please. So last month we reviewed some of the major site constraints, and those are noted on the left if you remember. And this diagram kind of builds on that assessment and shows how we're really focusing on this optimal build area, which is mainly the western portion of the site in the lower topography. We want to site most of our buildings in this area. We think it's going to be good for the function of the facility, as well as screening of views of the facility. Next, please. So one of the major considerations is the site's topography and the excavation that we're going to have to do to put the facilities in the right place, to maintain the hydraulic grade line, which will allow for gravity flow of water through these treatment basins. So as you can see in this upper diagram, the existing grade, this is a section cut through the red line on the bottom of where sort of the lowest part of the property. And you can already see where these basins need to be for the hydraulics to work and how much excavation may be involved for some of these structures. So we're looking at this in a way that we hope to minimize the excavation, and we're also trying to find the best approach for the final grading. The final grade may be anywhere from the bottom of these structures back up to the existing grade line, and we're trying to optimize the backfill so we can keep dirt on site and get that grade as close as possible to the existing. So we're still studying that, and we're going to be sharing more of that as we go along and how that is playing out. So in the next slide, you can see how we're starting to put all these puzzle pieces on the site, and we're testing a whole bunch of arrangements. And this is a graphic that just shows one of the arrangements we're looking at, where water's coming in from the right and leaving out the northwest side of this site. And we have all these different facilities that we need to put in the right place. The blue facilities are the main process pieces that need to be in the right places. Some of these, like the one shown in white, may be completely underground. Some may just be a little bit above ground, and some will be one-story buildings, and some may be 2 stories. We have a 35-foot height limit on the site.
Hey, Casey?
Yes, sir?
Can you go back one slide to show that where that dotted line is on that section?
I'm sorry?
On the right, yeah, on the right-hand side of this is
oh, yes, so
yeah, go ahead.
Right. So that white box that may be buried is the clear well, where the finished water is stored before pumping out. And that is such a deep basin that there's a likelihood that it could be completely covered over and vegetated, so it essentially would disappear into the landscape. So that's one example of how we're trying to utilize grade and the finished grade to really minimize the impact. So some of these facilities have flexibility, like in yellow. These would be the admin building or the maintenance building. And then in the green zones are the vegetated buffers, and these are the areas that we're going to use to help screen views, but also will be the locations for overflow basins and stormwater treatment areas that would be vegetated around them. So we're still working out the sizes and locations of those elements, and so we're just kind of showing them as puzzle pieces now, because they're still we're still trying to figure those out and how they fit together, literally. So in what we're not showing is roads yet. We don't know quite yet where those will be, but we know we're going to have access from the north and south, and we're still trying to figure out the best way to orient everything for best access. So in our August advisory group meeting, we're going to deep dive on the site, and we'll have made some more options and progress to show you then, and we can really get some good feedback from you on some of the things we're thinking about the site in August. So is there any questions about this topic before I turn it over to Jeff for architecture?
I do have a question from Daniel. Would those vegetated buffers be stormwater detention basins or the impervious area, roofs, and pavement?
Yes, the stormwater detention basins will be treating all the runoff from the site and detaining it. in those locations until I think there's we're still studying like what's the final where does that water finally go after we treat it. So I don't want to speak out of turn on that topic, but there will be incorporated within sort of a landscape buffer area. Any other questions? Okay. So again, we'll talk more about this in August, and I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Hi, folks. Let's talk a little bit about the architectural. Next slide, please. So tonight, we're going to show you some architectural style preferences. We've had some good feedback with some specific likes and dislikes, and sort of a definition of what we call context. The next steps we have is to apply some of these design style preferences, develop alternatives for the facility and the site. As Casey said, we're just getting started with this idea. We spent the day in office kind of pushing shapes around on the site and thinking about the volumes at this point. So it's still early in our work, but we're going to evaluate and select architectural design alternatives using some of this values criteria that we've identified with you and with the Water Bureau. Next, please. So one of the initial steps in identifying what we call the architectural context for the new facilities is to consider the character of the local buildings. You might be able to determine the general function of these buildings by the way they look. The barn, obviously that barn has a specific purpose, sorry. The lower right is essentially a school. I think any architect looking at that building would say that's a school. Obviously greenhouses are a very distinct look and all designed for their function. Other factors that might influence design are local weather patterns, sun angles, material choices for durability, and culture and local culture. So we call this the architectural context of the site. So generally we are trying to design buildings that are purpose-built and fit into their immediate environment. Next. So in thinking about the functional nature of these facilities and the local context, we identified 3 potential architectural styles that could be applied to different types of structures on the site. We shared samples, images of these 3 different styles and asked for your preferences and your likes and your dislikes, and which we will walk through next. Big picture, what we heard from you is a preference for the Agrarian and the Pacific Northwest architectural styles. It is likely that the ultimate facility will share kind of traits of both of those styles. Next. So Playful Industrial, this is the style, is one of the styles on the short list. This style is known for sort of bold, linear buildings, exposed metal, large screens. And believe it or not, this was ranked lowest on our survey. You can see the green is kind of even with this style is okay. So it's not overwhelming, and there was some negative feedback on this style. Next. Interestingly, Playful Industrial, what ranked okay was integration of different materials. What ranked absolutely low was a few bold design moves. So that's not what you're looking for, and we understand that. Next. And for the other comments on this, we got good feedback on, I don't like sheet metal, grid metal. It looks very expensive. Make the buildings as unobtrusive as possible. And keep with the agricultural and the green space environment that we love. This is why we moved here. So we got that message loud and clear. Next. Agrarian style, this one actually ranked the highest. Style ranks the highest. I'm sorry?
Sorry, Jeff, this is Casey. I was wondering, what could you add to how we might be able to make these buildings unobtrusive, what would be some strategies we'd use to accomplish that?
Yeah, unobtrusive, I believe means things that are similar to the Columbia Gorge guidelines, where it shows how buildings, roof lines, and massing sort of fits within the landscape. And you address the colors, you address the roof lines so that they are in fact unobtrusive. You use landforms and landscaping to sort of tuck them into those spaces. So that's how I'd answer that question. Okay. Next, please. Agrarian style. Okay, so this one ranked the highest in our poll. This was number one, not surprisingly. Sort of farm-like buildings designed for their function. It seems to be a theme running through these responses. However, fitting our needs into the tall typology of a hay barn was not desired in some of the imagery. Next. So we asked for your input in some of the specific elements that make the agrarian style unique. I think ranked number one was simple forms with modern update, shed and gable roofs. The long linear buildings, there it is again, not necessarily desired. The picture in the lower left is a hay barn. Obviously, if we started trying to put elements of a water treatment plant in a hay barn, that is disingenuous in our view and not necessarily in keeping with the function of the building. Next. So agrarian style, this is, this wood panel strips ranked high, structures are too high, keep it low. We keep hearing that. It will be located in an agrarian community, so hopefully it will fit in better. Keep the buildings as low as possible and more of a farmland feel. And I guess I would like to ask the question about the farmland feel. The person who wrote that comment, could you describe what that means, the farmland feel? No one wants to respond. I think
it may be somebody that wasn't that isn't at the meeting that may have still participated in the survey. But do you have another chance? Anybody?
Yeah. Bonita, this is Daniel. Can I jump in? I'm not sure if that particular one was my comment, but I did vote for the more agrarian style, and my feelings, I think, echoes some of the other folks in that, it is an agrarian type of community in that area, and my feeling was just that it would fit in better visually if there was some resemblance to, farmland, especially if there's some way that part of that land could continue to be leased out for farming purposes if it's not going to be entirely used. So, I mean, while I don't think that, going to the extent of having a really tall hay barn, I don't think that's necessary, because I also agree that you don't want something that's so much taller than everything else, but just in some way maintaining that feel, because my sense is too that over time the urban growth boundary is going to continue to expand, and helping to especially with leasing some of the land out to farms, just that would help maintain the feel of the community there. I know those are two kind of separate issues, but yeah, I just thought that for those reasons that was the best of the styles for me.
Good comments, thank you. Loud and clear.
Before we move on, any other thoughts on that? All right, cool.
Next slide, please. So this one also ranked pretty high. It was ranked second, Pacific Northwest style. Not surprisingly. We think, obviously, anything that is architecturally contextual with this place is essentially in this style. It reflects our climate to some degree. It reflects our culture to some degree, both on the insides of the building and the outsides of the building. So the Pacific Northwest style sort of should have threads, we think, through this project, and we agree that this one, even though it was sort of neutral in terms of really like this style, to me it would be a blend of the last one you saw, which was Agrarian, and the Pacific Northwest style as something to move forward on. So let's keep going. Next please. So you can see some specifics about this style, warm natural materials. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean interpretation of the graph that this is the highest ranked of all the styles. These are the highest ranked attributes of this particular style. So just wanted to make that clear. This is a little bit deceptive, but you know, lots of people liked warm natural materials, building integration with the landscape. Lower on the was the deep roof eaves, and then so the pictures on the left, I think, struck a chord with others. If that long overhang jutting out there actually does something to shade people walking beside it, or to shade windows because it's facing south or something like that, to me it has function. If it's just an aesthetic move, that's not enough to justify the expense and the look of something like that. And it's also a bit flashy. So by and large, those are our sort of comments related to your comments. And next. Too one-dimensional in structure, does not fit our area. Okay, I do not prefer this style, especially the what. I do prefer this style. So the low and stylish, we got the low and stylish idea. I like the front windows. I don't like the jutting roof line. I just described that. And we like these, we like that these are low to the ground. So
Jeff?
Yes.
This is Mike Coast.
Hi, Mike.
I'm Carol's husband. I have a question that if we have a 35-foot height, would it be possible for you guys to put a 35-foot height from, say, finished grade on the water tower to give everybody an idea?
I see.
How
a big red line?
Well, white line, I don't care. Just to give us an idea in perspective how big this may be.
Well, it sounds like a great idea. Sometimes we do what's called story poles, and it's a 35-foot pole with some markers on it. And maybe we can ask the Water Bureau to actually put a story pole attached to the water tower. But in general, the water tower is about 100+ feet tall, and the panels that make up that water tower, I believe, are around 10 feet. So you can sort of get a sense of 3.5 of those panels. But I like your suggestion. I think we'll follow up on that.
Thank you.
Okay, let's keep going. So this is kind of a summary snapshot of those three styles. So the highest ranked attributes were this warm natural materials. Obviously, wood is hard to maintain in this environment. So warm natural materials might mean stone, might mean other materials available to us that are very durable, that have a warm finish to them. And we'll get back to you with some input on that when we start really thinking about what these buildings look like. Building integration with landscape elements, we like this. Our landscape architect likes this. If it comes out of the land somehow and respects the land, it needs to really show that. So 85% of the people responded that way. Integration of different materials, I think that really speaks to these, the lack of a big, bold, or linear moves. Break it up in some way. I believe that's how that's interpreted. So if that's not right, please speak. Please interrupt me. Shed and gable roofs are familiar forms. We often say that if roof forms are not familiar, they stick out. And that's part of this unobtrusive idea. But simple forms with a modern update is sort of the blend of the Agrarian style and the Pacific Northwest style. So this seems to be the highest ranked. Other comments muted earth tones. This also follows the Columbia Gorge Guidelines document, as well as low roof lines. Is there anything else that we forgot?
Not seeing any hands or comments.
Great. I'm going to turn it over to Casey, who's going to talk a little bit about fencing and things like that. Casey?
Thanks, Jeff. We also presented some info for you in the survey regarding how we should treat the entries and get your preferences on that, and get your preferences on fencing in the area. And there's different styles for both. And like with architecture, we will likely use a mix of strategies depending on the location of and the type of security we may be needing. The Water Bureau facilities themselves will be behind security lines, and where feasible, fencing can be set back from the perimeter and leave those opportunities we talked about earlier for community access, agricultural areas, wildlife buffers, and the like. So let's discuss some of your preferences. Next. Pretty obvious where people's opinions lie on the how the entries should be treated. It was really good to see almost overwhelming response here for setting back the entry gates from the perimeter and using landscaping to kind of buffer that edge and push it back. A lot behind that was the idea of using one of our buildings like the admin building and pulling it to the edge, or using that as one of the secure edges for the public. And then the idea of the automatic call box with a gate near the edge was also not as favored, and we appreciate those responses. So that seemed pretty clear, your preference there. Next up is the fencing. And when we surveyed you, we gave you a few examples of the types of fencing we often use in these projects. And just in some late breaking responses, some of the preferences switched actually. The two highest ranked though were wire fencing, where we could use maybe a cheaper fencing further from public view, but we still need the security. And most often the security will be a mix of this, and where it's more visible to the public, the wrought iron seemed more appealing to you. And the idea of using a depression called a ha-ha, which we talked about last month, running your fencing in that depression didn't get you as excited. And even less so was the idea of decorative metal fencing at entries. So the way I read this is simplify the fencing and focus on setting it back and screening it with vegetation and keeping it simple. So I don't know if I mentioned this, but often the fencing for security purposes is going to have to be about 8 foot tall at a minimum. And we often combine this with security cameras so that we can have eyes on the perimeter without having to have as robust a fencing strategy like with barbed wire or 12-foot high fences. We really, nowadays, the trend is to rely on cameras and infrared so that people can monitor the perimeter easier. So would anyone like to speak a little further about the mixing and matching of the fencing strategies?
Hey, Casey, before we take any questions on that, can you hear me?
Yes.
The ha-ha idea Unfortunately, this picture has a fence that crosses it, sort of perpendicular to it. And I just want to be clear, we're thinking of potentially putting the fence in the depression going linearly on that ha-ha, so that the fence itself would kind of disappear while still providing security. So that's a kind of a farm trick, agricultural trick that is used for sort of controlling livestock and such. But we're thinking more along those lines. We just could not find a picture to match that.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. The depression is really meant so that when you're looking across the landscape, you don't see the fence, you just see what looks like landscape because the depression hides it. So English gardens use that a lot in the old days. So next up, I did want to present something a little new and get your opinion, because we didn't present this in the survey, but we have had some projects that utilize rock walls, or a combination of a rock wall and a short fence section to get that 8 feet. And sometimes this makes a lot of sense for aesthetics, as well as if you have a rocky site, you can reuse the materials. The one on the left is a gabion wall, which is basically wire cages that they stack rock in. And the other one is more of a conventional stacked rock that can have a number of finishes and qualities to the rock itself. And so I wanted to bring this up today, kind of out of the blue, to get your feelings on using rock as part of the security fencing strategies. Would love to hear some opinions.
As far as the stacked rock style goes, I feel as though aesthetically that might look nice as like at the perimeter where the gate would be, the entrance to the facilities. But definitely just like for aesthetic purposes in that one location, not really like all over or anything.
Okay.
I think the gabion rock wall would be a less expensive version than the stacked rock wall, because it doesn't involve as much manpower. And from a distance, you don't see the wire. And it's used a lot more in Eastern Oregon than it is here in the northwest corner, but is just as effective.
With the stacked rock wall, can you hear me?
Yes.
I feel that the rock walls look nice, but it's usually on where you have an elevation, you know, where you're holding it back. I just to set it on the flat land, and not really knowing, you know, how it is up there, but I feel that I'm not in favor of the stacked wall. Can I go back to something? You know, I am new on here, and on this last one, when you were talking about the public access, you know, in the building, why are we talking about public access? This was on the last slides.
Oh yeah. Public access, often a plant like this, City of Portland's only filtration plant, we often plan for tours of the plant. Usually school kids, public groups come out during scheduled times and get tours of the treatment plant. It might be part of the tour that then continues on up to Bull Run and look at the reservoirs, and this would be one of the stops. And so we're still trying to get the right input and understanding about the expectations for tours here. We have heard previous feedback from this group about not wanting it just sort of open to the public, kind of parkland for random public people to come visit. But I think there is some expectation, and maybe Dave Peters could speak a little more about the likelihood of tours.
Do we not already have a requirement for the Bull Run area of 80 tours as a limit, or 80 days, I guess, or 80 tours as a limit in any calendar year? And I would guess that the city of Portland, when you're spending in excess of 500 million and upwards, would want to see what they got their money's worth for. So I'm thinking, whether we like it or not, there is going to be some form of visitation, though it won't be come one, come all.
I guess what I'm thinking of is, this is a filtration plant. I think we already are going to have enough traffic on the roads. I don't see the reason to be able to have people come and view it. I guess I'm wrong on that, but you know, let's just use it for the purpose it is, and we already and not turn into a tourist attraction.
I agree with Patricia. That we don't need to bring any more traffic in here. I wouldn't want to see that.
Okay. And
yeah. So go ahead.
Getting back now to where we're at on the entry, you were talking about the use of cameras.
Yes.
You know, because of the new modern age. But can I ask you a question? So now you see somebody, because security is going to be very important, obviously, because it's protecting our water. But what happens? Okay, you see somebody coming onto the property and the camera. So then what happens? How do you stop them? You see what I mean? How's the camera going to help you to stop them?
I can't say much about that beyond that the facility would probably have at least one or more people there round the clock to monitor. And so I don't know what the protocols are.
Okay, thank you.
So,
thank you.
Go ahead, Dave.
So maybe I could add a couple thoughts to both topics, the tours and the security. I don't have all the answers on the security either, but certainly the fences. The idea with the fences is that they are intended to keep people from getting in. The cameras kind of help us if we see someone trying to do that to have records to be able to identify them and things like that. We do have Water Bureau security. Basically, they're the first people that would be called to come and help with a situation like that. And as we get farther in, we'll be able to talk more thoroughly about security and what we would have at a facility like this with our security folks, if that'd be helpful. In regards, yeah.
This is Mike Coast. I have some experience with the gabion. It is quite easily scaled with the wire and the uneven rock. I would highly dislike a gabion wall because
I'm glad
you could go over at any point.
Thank you for making that comment. I was thinking the same thing about these rock walls.
Just before you continue on, David, I just wanted to point out that we are at 7 o'clock, but we're great to keep going if you are all willing to keep going as well. Still have a few more slides left, but I do think we should address that that issue of the tours.
Is everyone okay with me taking a couple more minutes here?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. In regards to the tours, I mean, I'm not sure about the exact number. As Jane pointed out, 80. I think there are some guidelines in terms of what we do each summer up in the watershed, and those tours are guided tours where we're bringing some public members, sometimes they're educational folks, up on a bus. And so it's not the type of thing where this would just be open for people to drive out to regularly, that would bring a lot of traffic or anything. That the types of things that we currently do are related to guided tours where we'd bring people out. So it'd be a single bus. I think the bus that we have right now holds, I think, 25 or 28 folks, something like that. And so it'd be something along those lines is more typically what we'd experience. We have that, and then with a treatment plant like this, and like we've done with others. Other utilities may come out. And so when we talk about public facilities, you know, that means anyone that's not a Water Bureau employee. You know, so whether it's from another organization, another utility, all of that's considered public, you know, where we can bring people in through a secure location and let them into the facility. But it's not the type of thing where you're going to have hundreds of cars coming out to take a look at the facility. Does that help a little bit also? I mean, as Casey pointed out, I mean, these are still topics of conversation. So we have heard your input that there's a preference to not have tours. And so all of that will be part of our conversation as we go forward and talk with our education folks and others. But we'll have more on that as we get farther into the design.
Yeah, and this is Jeff. I think the other thing we heard is tourist attraction. I think that's going to be really sensitive if this is something that people just want to stop in and take a look. So we have to be sensitive to the idea of attracting just people off the street to see what's there as well. So the intent is not to make this a tourist attraction at all. To make that clear.
I just want to point out Charlie has her hand raised. So do you have a question, Charlie?
Yeah, I just had a comment. I understand like the concerns with traffic and not wanting to be a tourist attraction, but I would say that when we toured the Wilsonville plant, it was really refreshing to see people walking their dogs and like just having, there was like a trail there and a field and everything. And I understand that we may not want a lot of people going there, but just the idea that even some of the families that live off Carpenter Lane and in the area, like they could take their dogs and their kids and like go hang out in a nice little park area. Like even if we don't want it to be too touristy or to attract people, I do think it still should be a discussion to allow areas like that to be offered to the public, because I definitely thought it was a nice addition for some of that land around the Wilsonville plant.
Thanks, Charlie. That's some good feedback. Daniel, you had your hand raised too?
Yeah, a few comments. I guess since we're talking about visitors, I think that comparing this to the Bull Run is probably a good comparison, because there it's an example where people can't just come in. It's very carefully controlled. And I think with signage at the front gate saying, you know, to sign up for a public tour, please call this number, no walk-ins allowed, or something like that, would really go a long way. Because I think, especially considering this is going to be something like $1 billion facility, I think a lot of ratepayers are going to want to see what the money was spent on. And people are going to be curious, but I think this idea that they'll all show up in one bus, maybe 28 people at a time, I don't really think that'll really add to the traffic over the course of a year. But I definitely hear what some others are saying here, that they don't want this to result in more traffic. On the subject of the walls, I think that, you know, rock walls could potentially have a use in certain areas, but I would not want to see it for long distances. I mean, cost is certainly part of it, but I'm just wondering if the, this question about, is it easier to scale the rocks, and it's also, you can't see through it, and it could be helpful both from the outside and the inside to basically see what's going on instead of having it opaque. You know, when it comes to gabions too, and I'll just say right out, my experience with gabion walls has been my profession of stream restoration, and I've seen gabion walls just like fall apart after 10 years. I'm sure this is going to be much better construction, but I would have a question about the longevity of a gabion rock wall.
I would also have a question about the weight, because anywhere that you put this wall is going to be of great weight, because my experience has been that gabion rock walls are at least 3 to 4 feet wide, and that's an awful lot of weight sitting on what is already a precarious landmass.
Awesome. These are really great comments. I really appreciate your thoughtfulness. And what I took away from your comments was maybe limited use in more of a decorative fashion or as a retaining wall, maybe as a replacement or a fascia to, instead of just a concrete retaining wall, maybe this would be more attractive for smaller segments. Definitely not like long runs. It's not really native to this area. It's not a lot of just rock stacked walls like you might find back east or something, right? So I really appreciate those thoughts and preferences. I think next was sort of a summary, and I think we've kind of hit on these, all your preferences that we've talked about, and the last bullet point here is interesting, mentioning the deer and elk that come here, and that fencing maybe need to keep them out. And we've talked about wildlife buffer areas and areas for wildlife to maybe pass through, but maybe there's also a strategy that really defines where those areas are and then keeping them out of other areas and maybe helping to keep them out of the agricultural areas on the site.
So this is Jeff. I'd like to know, we've just gone to the site again and walked through and walked around the site, and there is quite a fence on the east side that's got some fabric in it. And is that for the elk? And do the elk walk through the planted areas? And if so, what direction do they walk, and how do they get into the site?
Maybe Sean has some feedback on that.
Yeah, so the elk are a major problem. Once they go into an area and they get scared, they do a lot of damage. And so we ran that fence the whole length of the property, but basically they'll come in where the fence ends over there by Dave, by the coast side of Mike's side over there, or the very far end. And you do not want the elk on the property. It would be a very ugly situation, I can tell you that. You don't want to scare them. You don't want to spook them because they do a lot of damage. And so we put that fence up basically to keep them out. The deer can jump the fence, but the elk can't. The deer mainly just eat the tops of the trees, and they do that type of damage. But a herd of like 20 elk will come through there, and it's very destructive. And they come up from Oxbow Park. There's a herd down there, so that's where they come from.
Thank you.
Oh, Sean, this is Mike Coast.
Yeah, Mike.
I've had 28 head in my backyard on my grass that we mow.
Wow.
Yep. I believe that, and that's the end of the fence.
Yeah, and when you guys put that up, you stopped it. And I understand why you put it up, because it did so much damage. But right up this little draw on our property is how the animals come across Dodge Park and come up from Lusted and down in that bowl.
Yep.
And we can hear elk almost every night until they put the fence up in our backyard.
Yeah. Well, I think we even extended it through your property, didn't we, a little bit a few years ago?
Yes, it went clear up the side to where the animals probably couldn't get in. But that was a pretty good thoroughfare for the elk coming into your property.
Oh yeah, yeah, they're extremely. They can do a lot of damage really quick, especially when they get spooked. And that's not something you want to have a little passage where they can go through or whatever. You just need to keep those out completely.
So the damage they're doing is from erosion, or are they eating the trees?
Well, they're eating trees, but to give you an example, we'll have trees that are staked with, let's just say bamboo, and they'll get scared and they'll just run right over the top of the bamboo and the trees and everything and just plow it down. So yeah, we don't want them eating the trees, but once they get spooked, they just take off, and whatever's in their way, they just take it out.
Wow.
And they're very large too. There's, I don't know what they weigh, but they're pretty big.
Yep, those are big animals.
Yeah.
So
And
thank
there's a
you.
lot of them, like, yeah, like Mike said, 20 something. So.
Thanks for the input.
So when we're thinking about wildlife corridors and areas, we're maybe thinking about birds, smaller animals, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, I understand.
Okay. No, I'm that's me reacting to. I was thinking we wanted the elk to have a place, but now I understand better. Thank you. I think Bonita, I'm done with my content. I'll turn it over to you for final stuff.
Just want to make sure that we don't have any other comments or questions about any of the information that was presented tonight. You can feel free to raise your hand or chat or just chime in and unmute yourself. Okay, good. So let's talk about this meeting and let me know, is there anything that, you know, we're in this new environment still of doing virtual meetings, and is there anything that could be done better with this format, or I'm automatically thinking maybe we want to start making these meetings till 7:30 so we can make sure that we have ample time for people to give their comments. Interested in any other sort of feedback? Anyone? Okay. And so we'd also like your advice on any sort of ways we might be able to better reach out to some of your other neighbors. We recently, I should turn my video on here so you don't, I'm not just talking to space. We recently started the process of getting a Nextdoor account, an agency account, so that way we can let people know a little bit more about what's happening, just finding new ways to reach out to people. And as you know, we post this information on the website, and then we send that information out through our email, and with the hopes that people will comment on these, the same material that you've commented on. And, you know, be helpful if you get those emails, if you want to share those with your neighbors so that we're making sure that we're getting as much feedback as we can. And like I mentioned, we will have a Nextdoor account soon to help get this information out. But if you have any other suggestions of the best ways to let neighbors know about these opportunities for input, we are open to that. Just leave the floor open for a moment to see if anybody has any ideas on that or anything. They can always put it in the chat too, or send me an email. We're always open to receiving any sort of feedback. Or you can call me too. I love phone calls. You can text me. My phone number is actually my mobile phone too, so you can text me anytime that you need to have any questions or feedback or comments. Next slide here. Alrighty, so we have had a few questions and requests about additional topics that we're going to be coming up, and we're going to respond to a few of those items this evening and plan to focus on pipelines in our upcoming July meeting. Then in August, we'll go back to the facility layout and design. And we're looking at having an online open house in September that will present all of the information that we've talked about and the design conversations with this group, and present all of that at once, and hopefully have that up for a while for people to be able to provide feedback that maybe they missed out on the first time around when we send that information out. So if you have any other ideas or something that you wanted to make sure that we included within the next couple of months, you can let me know that as well. Anybody have anything to say about that right now? All right, I'm not seeing any action here. So I want to thank you for participating this evening. I'm going to turn it over to Dave to close it out.
Yeah, I just reiterate what Bonita said. Thank you so much for spending another evening with us and talking through these topics. This is great feedback. You can see that with the designers on board now, we're actually starting to think about these topics of how things fit on the site and work together. And so the information that you're providing is going right into those conversations that we're having with our designers. So we do appreciate so much you spending this time with us and providing this feedback. I realize the next time we see it should actually, at least on the calendar, be summer. So look forward to seeing you next month and being with you again. So
Before
thank you.
we sign out, I saw Mike had his hand raised. I just want to make sure that you didn't have one final comment or anything.
I do have one thing.
Okay.
Are you going to be bringing up more about the tours later on? Because when I was working in treatment plants, we used to have a lot of the film industry show up and do a lot of filming. And they were very disruptive. And I don't think anybody would like them out here because sometimes they film all night long with lights going. And they always were getting in the way. And they're very rude and they intend to do their job and they don't care what they're doing. So just want to point that out.
That's good feedback. We hadn't thought about that, or that hadn't been on our radar. So we appreciate those comments.
Yeah, we were a favorite spot for them. They did a lot of movies. They're constantly out there, and they were pretty much in the way a lot. And when they come out, that's their job, and that's it, period. Everyone get out of their way.
I think in all the tours I did for treatment plants, there was only one mention of a film being done in their plant, but it was down in the tunnels underneath in the filter gallery. So it was all inside.
Yeah, we had them all over the place. We had a Japanese garden, and they were filming out there. They're filming inside our plant in our galleries. You probably have seen the treatment plant because it's been in dozens of movies and TV programs and commercials.
Yeah, I have seen it before. Yeah.
I know I have a friend that works at the Columbia Boulevard treatment plant here in Portland, and they love the old industrial wasteland of parts of that plant, and they're out there filming all night, like you said, Mike.
All right. Any other final comments, questions, concerns? All right. Then we will call it an evening. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we'll get you some more information out within the next couple of weeks about the pipeline.